You're listening to another episode of the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell, and I've got a little bit of a different guest this week on the Coaster101 podcast. A lot of times we will talk theme parks, roller coasters, but it's not often we get to talk documentaries that are what I'm going to call theme park adjacent. And so without further ado, I'm going to bring him in. He is the creator of White Lake Productions and the director of the new documentary, The Stolen Kingdom, Joshua Bailey. Joshua, welcome to the Coaster101 podcast.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, this is one of those things. I saw Stolen Kingdom. It popped up on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, saw the trailer, and as someone who is chronically online, this is something it's a documentary to me that just scratches an itch in just my nerdy Disney loving, theme park loving brain. Because this is the story about how, you said, again, it was 7 years ago at this point, the internet was ablaze about rumors of what happened to an animatronic at Epcot. And we're going to get to it, I promise. But I want to learn more about Joshua, because on the website bio for the Stolen Kingdom, says you grew up in Florida, you worked in theme parks. What's your history with theme parks and the amusement industry?
Yeah, so I grew up in Tampa, Florida. Disney was like an arm's length away for us, about an hour and a half drive. And I think that just really sparked an early fascination with the parks. Because it's not like so far that you're not ever going to get to go, or maybe once a year. So it's like it was right there. And I grew up loving film, and that was kind of like a natural extension of film in my mind, especially early on with Imagineering. Those were all film artists, set decorators and painters and animators, etc. So that was like a living film set. And when I wanted to start making films when I was 18, the closest school that I could realistically get into, because I didn't do great in school as like a artist, skateboarder, punk kid. But there was a community college in Orlando called Valencia, and they had a film program. So it was like, two birds, one stone, because I could move to Orlando, go to Valencia, and finally work at the theme parks. So I started applying. I was still in high school, honestly, in Tampa, and I drove back and forth on that terrible drive on I-4 to interview and do like pre-employment screening things, to set all of this up so that when I finally did move, I'd have the job and I could work. And they put me on a wait list, and then finally called me and told me I got Epcot attractions. So excited, because I love Epcot. I think Epcot was probably at the time my favorite park. Everyone's favorite Disney park kind of moves around as they grow. But at the time, that was my favorite. Unfortunately, I worked at Innoventions. I got a very not cool attraction. But at this point, as someone who's really interested in extinct attractions and abandoned things, it's kind of like weirdly kismet that I worked there. I worked at Some of All Thrills, and eventually I worked at Habit Heroes and did like the spieling position. It was like one of two spieling positions on property where you got a little bit of a dollar raise when you were spieling. It was that and Kilimanjaro Safaris. It was, pretty fun. The job was pretty fun. I quit after 4 months because I hated the company. My managers were not nice. A lot of the stuff the way that Disney is run behind the scenes was just not working with me. So I quit after 4 months. But I came back years later and worked at another like weird blip in Disney history. I worked at Jungle Book Alive with Magic and Rivers of Light.
Okay.
They opened the show, which was strange. Then I worked at Universal for 2 years. In between that, like quitting Disney and then coming back to Disney, I worked Diagon Alley like 6 months after it opened. I worked on Gringotts and then Ollivanders.
Sweet. I love it. I mean, so you're well versed in the Orlando theme park space for sure. And what was it? Again, we'll rewind the calendar here. This is 2018. The internet was ablaze, and this is like peak theme park internet. Rumors, whatever. Urbex was a thing. People were kind of sneaking around in the parks. There were YouTube channels that were kind of coming out about it. But like, what was it about this situation with Buzzy that inspired you to kind of want to create a documentary film? I know you've teamed up with Jake Williams from Bright Sun Films, who did the Close for Storm documentary, which is if you're listening and haven't seen it, I believe it's on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
Highly recommend going to check that out. But what was it about this situation? You're like, I want to tell this story.
We felt like we had to tell the story and that there was no one better to tell it because I had heard about all of this before it happened, and before a lot of it was reported on Twitter and such. I grew up, like I mentioned, I was like a skateboarding punk kid and was into Disney, and that kind of crossroads that I found a little later in life, like maybe high schoolish, coming out of it, was people like Adam the Woo and Leonard Kinsey. They were way older than me because I was 17, 18, 19. But I thought they were really cool and like looked up to those dudes. And I was like, you can be, like alt and punk and go to Disney World all the time still.
Mm-hmm.
That exists. And I also grew up urban exploring, not at Disney, but just I was like a lifelong fascination of abandoned places, just like Jake, which is how we eventually crossed paths. So when I moved to Orlando and started working at these theme parks, and then these people started doing it again, like Matt Sansois and Backdoor Disney. I was just I felt like I had to take advantage of this like movement happening again, or not like take advantage of it, but just be a part of it somehow. Like I really felt compelled to be there, boots on the ground with this. If it was like it was like it's happening again. There's another generation of these dark side, like underground people. So we met. We just randomly reached out to Backdoor Disney. No one knew who he was at the time. This was 20. I guess it was 2018. We had started to like do some soft, not urbexing, but we would like try and figure out how some of these people were doing this stuff and just drive around property. There's a lot of roads that'll take you like back towards backstage entrances and things that are like public roads. And we are like, I wonder if like Matt Sonswap, parked here and there's a video of him longboarding at Epcot. We're like, that's really strange. How did he get in? Um, and eventually, yeah, so we reached out to Patrick and met up with him. We had thought that like we were like, we're gonna do what Leonard did. And I guess a lot of these other people, Adam the Woo is like a, half of a pseudonym, Justin Scarred. It's like something that's within the punk community and in this Disney urbex community where people kind of use pseudonyms.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's use pseudonyms and reach out to Patrick because we don't want to get banned. We don't want to do what they're doing necessarily, but like we're so curious. Who is this guy? Backdoor Disney. So we reached out, gave him pseudonyms. We said, "Ah, hey, we're such and such. Let's meet up, man. We're like trying to make it seem like we were the next Matt Sonswa, which we had no intentions of doing because he's crazy. What he did was crazy. His videos are insane. Um, and I think Patrick responded well to that. We had some other urbex videos, just general urbex, not at Disney.
Mm-hmm.
So they were like, cool, like street cred. Let's meet up and let's talk.
Yeah.
And we met him behind the Magic Kingdom parking lot, the West Clock parking lot for all the cast members out there. And just he told us all of this stuff about the black market community. We had thought that there was maybe something interesting within the urbex community. We just didn't realize that there was like a black market for Disney props specifically.
Yeah. And what and that these conversations with Patrick, who is, as we discussed a little bit, who you referred to as the star of the film. I
Yeah.
mean, there's the videos on the internet of him losing, like the police trying to take his phone and him like throwing the phone and all this. There are clips, and the trailer to this documentary it's bananas. But you've got all of these again, kind of legends in the alternative Disney community. You've got Leonard Kinsey, who we've interviewed on Coaster 101 before, Adam the Woo you mentioned. You've got all these people, but like, where do you think the black market comes from? Do you think it's just people who go to Disney for they've gone for so many years and they just want to kind of experience something in a different way? Or is it, what is it about this community that you think made it so enticing for telling that story?
Yeah, I think it's people's connection to Disney ultimately, and it's part of what I like about the title Stolen Kingdom, that it's double meaning. It's people were literally stealing from Disney, but it is also this theoretical kingdom that people have stolen, in the sense that it's grown bigger than itself, Disney as a company, and a lot of people, you know, particularly in American pop culture, feel ownership over it because it is so important to them. People feel ownership over these characters and these properties and these parks. Sometimes you close an attraction at Walt Disney World. I know you've seen that the reactions to some of this stuff. People really feel a deep connection to it. I did with Great Movie Ride. I felt a really deep connection to that attraction. And they
Yeah.
just want, like, they're so desperately grabbing for pieces of that. It's like what Hoot and Chief do in the film, just trying to photograph it as kind of their way of preserving it. And for people that have deep pockets, it's yeah, spending $10,000 on a an animatronic or something.
Yeah. When, you know, interacting with these people, how willing were some of these people to give interviews versus was there anybody you guys reached out to who didn't want to be interviewed or wanted their voice changed, their name changed, or anything like that? Some of these people, they're a little bit more out there with their brazenness, I think is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But, when kind of finding sources to talk to through this project, was there anybody who was like, no, absolutely not. I don't want my name associated with this?
Yes, Adam Lewu.
Okay.
Yeah, he is there. It was impossible not to talk about him because he was such a huge influence to some of the people in our film, some of our participants, and just as if anyone knows this story, they know that he is kind of a, I think, referred to in the film as a behemoth of theme park exploration. Um, yeah, he wanted no involvement
Okay.
in the documentary. I spoke to him in person about it. I respect his decision. He wants to put this part of his life behind him. Um, it was really, yeah, it was really tricky for us because we wanted to respect that, but at the same time, we couldn't like
Right.
not acknowledge his existence.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, did not want to go down the path of Disney urban exploring again. He was unbanned. If anyone's unfamiliar with Adam's history, he was pretty brazen, I'd say, in the mid 2010s. Obviously, making him kind of part of the video, putting his face on camera and his personality and everything was kind of really new to the game at the time, and got banned. Was banned for 2 years, I think,
Hmm.
and then was unbanned and has
Got it.
been unbanned ever since. That was, almost 10 years, I think, or more at this point.
Yeah. And I'm not going to ask you to go kind of like frame by frame here, but let's get a synopsis of the overall story here. Again, this focuses on the whereabouts, what happened, how it happened with Buzzy, who is the animatronic at Cranium Command at the long shuttered Wonders of Life Pavilion. But where does the film start, and how does it kind of go through that process?
Yeah, we in the edit, I think we kind of upfront give a little history on the Buzzy case, just because that's
Hmm.
kind of where we're going to end up. We kind of show the end at the beginning. But since I wrote an outline for this, it was probably 7 years ago at this point when the crimes ended up happening, that it needs to start with Hoot and Chief, the two, explorers who jumped out of Horizons in 1999. And they were really the first domino that tipped and led all the way to Buzzy in a strange way. Like, they really did unintentionally lead to Buzzy. So we kind of chronologically go through that. Like, these guys were the first. They were very innocent and wholesome, and they were doing it for like a greater good to preserve the attraction, and they loved it. And this beautiful story of friendship. And then moving into things turned a little more sinister. The dark side of Disney is, sex and drugs at Disney World. Adam, like, just being really like, hey, here I am, here's my face on camera, and YouTube culture, and
Yeah.
then that next generation of Matt Sonswa and Patrick just taking it to a whole other level, and then obviously it culminates in Buzzy's disappearance.
Got it. Okay. And you know, this to me, and I think Patrick's kind of reemerged on social media here in a little bit, maybe around the film. But you
Yeah.
guys, you've premiered at the Big Sky Film Festival. You've also been at Slam Dance and the Florida Film Festival. How has reception of this documentary been so far?
Incredible. Yeah, I'm really surprised that we hadn't shown it to an audience at all. We didn't do like a test audience or like a cast and crew screening. We just didn't get an opportunity to do that beforehand. So we just didn't know what people would laugh at. We knew what we thought was funny, what we thought was touching, but we just didn't know how audiences would respond. And man, people have really been laughing a lot. Um, People showed up to Slam Dance because it's an hour from Disneyland, so some people showed up in Disney merch and stuff. Really touching to see that some Imagineers showed up. We're like really into the film because Imagineers are just like nerds for the company. They love it
Yeah.
so much. So yeah, really overall positive reactions.
That's good.
Yeah.
And something like this, I mean, you mentioned 7 years you started writing a script, but how has the development been over the years? I mean, are we talking like years of interviews that you've compiled with all of these guys and or all of these people? I should say I don't know if it's all men or not, but um is it years of interviews? How have you kind of compiled, or are you just kind of like storyboarding things out? It's like, okay, I want to start with Hoot and Chief, or I want to start with Leonard Kinsey and see where this goes, and then if he says something, do we go from there? Like, what was that process like?
Well, we met Patrick. There was a day that I was going to hang out with him again. The second time I would have seen him was the day that he got arrested and tackled by the police. So that never happened. And then we were like, wow, let's maybe, back off. But it was that night I said, this needs to be a documentary. And then like years passed. He was arrested. We were just seeing these updates every once in a while from like Orlando Sentinel and things from Gabby Russin, who is in
Yep.
the film. Um, we were reading her articles years before we interviewed her. Um, it was like court date set for Disney Thief, blah, blah, blah. So we were like, okay, just keeping a really close eye on it. We had to wait until he was tried or whatever happened, whatever the outcome was. And then we had to wait a year for the public records to become available, to wait like a full 365 days. And then COVID happened.
Hmm.
So this whole time it was just like this project. I think a lot of people have that project that's just kind of in the back of your mind and you're slowly like saving little news articles and images and things over the years. And then in 2021, finally, it was the first time that two of the producers flew. I lived in Austin at the time, and they flew out to see me for the first time since, quarantine. And one of them just like brought it up. Hey, what about that black market documentary we've been working on for years, just kind of kicking around? I'm like, yeah, let's see if we can get Patrick, because that was kind of the if we don't have Patrick, we don't have a film.
Yeah.
So we got the interview with him. He was the first one that we shot, and that was all in 2021. We shot the interviews over a few months in 2021. Um, yeah, it was tough shooting it. We had no budget. It was just what we had in our bank accounts at the time. Flying back and forth and driving around. We drove up to Baltimore to shoot like 4 interviews because Leonard Kinsey lives up there and a few other people. And then post production ended up being even worse than production. Because post production is very, very hard. And
Hmm.
that's so we shot it in like 2 months, and then post production took like 3 years.
Wow.
Um,
And this is, I mean, what's the end goal here? Obviously, starting at film festivals, eventually to be released, maybe to the mainstream. I know with Jake's Closed for Storm documentary, it's a closed Six Flags park. So I will say the closed Six Flags park that no longer exists, that they've leveled in the last 2 months officially.
yeah.
They're probably a little easier to deal with legality, with than the Walt Disney Corporation. Do you foresee there being any issues with this making it to mainstream with Disney or anything like that?
No, I don't think so. We haven't had any issues so far. I think a lot of people have kind of wondered if Disney has reached out or if
Yeah.
they're aware of the project, which, I'm sure they're aware of it. I don't think they care. I think well, maybe they care, but their best strategy is just to not acknowledge it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of similar projects that have happened over the year. You know, a lot of people reference Escape from Tomorrow, which is a
Yep.
narrative project, but um, probably the most notorious. And they just ignored it. You know, they eventually acknowledged it, which is very strange in like a D23 calendar. They just like on this day, Escape from Tomorrow movie shot at Disney released, which is
Oh,
very strange.
that's the hardcore nerds paying
Yeah,
homage
right.
there.
That's
Like,
the employees love this stuff. That maybe once you get all the way up to the top of the ladder, the corporate people really don't like it so much. But yeah, you know, there's streamers that we can't land on, obviously, like Hulu.
yeah,
But otherwise, you know, we've been sending it out there and shopping it around, and that's never been something that anyone has brought up.
yeah.
You know, the whole Disney angle. So I think we've got a great film. I think it's has like a wide appeal
I
with
think
it
so.
being like nonviolent true crime related to Disney. Whether you've been to Walt Disney World or not, you know of Disney. You know of Disney World.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
and I think it. You bring up a good point there. It's a crime documentary. It's not specifically for theme park fans, but will do a lot of fan service for the people like me who are just deeply nerdy about this stuff. But I think it's got wide appeal beyond that space because again, everybody, if even if they haven't been, they're familiar with Disney World. It's this aspirational destination where outside sunshine and rainbows, but deep within the bowels of everything that goes on, there is all of this, as Leonard Kinsey said in his book and his documentary, was it's the dark side. And the dark stuff, like you said, has it's spiraled out of control in recent years. Was there anything when you guys were kind of interviewing Patrick and these other um, personalities, I think, for lack of a better term, was there anything that like they told you that you were just completely mind blown or surprised about?
While shooting, yeah, there's a funny scene where we were obviously really invested in the crime, I think, and it was ultimately not our focus to solve it. We wanted to. This was like in the end, it wasn't the goal to solve it. We just wanted to package up the story for someone who had maybe never heard it
Mm-hmm.
and like tell it the ultimate telling of this story. You know, for those not in the know. But when we started, we were a little obsessed with trying to solve it, as I think a lot of people became once they heard about an animatronic's disappearance. So we were really deep in the trenches, and we interviewed Matt Sonswa, and he just said, "Oh well, Patrick told me he was offered $50,000 to steal the redhead, which had just been removed from Pirates of the Caribbean." And there was a night where he was out and found it. It was in and all. It wasn't like accessible, but he was like, "There it is. You know, I know where it is," and was just freaking out. I'm sure I can imagine now what was going through his mind at the time. I don't think I had any idea, but we shot that before we interviewed Patrick. So then we got to like confront Patrick about that because he was like kind of being a little coy about not getting offers to steal large animatronics or like not just getting large offers like that in general. So that was pretty like that was on the level of the of Buzzy,
Yeah.
in my opinion. It's like a ginormous animatronic. So that really felt like, oh gosh, if he got an offer for the redhead, then maybe someone did at least offer him money to steal Buzzy.
Mm,
So that was it felt like a huge lead. It didn't lead to anywhere, but yeah,
gotcha.
for a moment there we were really excited. We're like, oh my gosh.
he told us, but he didn't tell us, but he told us.
Yeah, I was like, that's almost the same. Who was asking for the redhead? Maybe they also wanted Buzzy.
Yes. Oh man, that's wild. How long is this? I mean, the is it's a full length feature, I'm assuming, but how long of a runtime are we talking here?
It's only 74 minutes. It's a cool 74 minutes. We made it nice and tight, trimmed it down. I think there was much longer cuts, but couldn't get too explainy. You know, I think a lot of the theme park people they might want to dig deeper. Uh, you know, it turned out that this was we thought that it might be for that audience at first, but then we were like, this is bigger than that. I think
Yeah.
so. A lot of that nitty gritty stuff we lost. Which is hard for me. I'm a lifelong theme park fan. I watch
Yes.
Martin's vids and Defunct Land and all of these channels on YouTube. Who we have Matthew Serrano who works with Defunct Land often, and made a great Hoot and Chief film. Remain
Mhm.
Seated, Please on YouTube. So it was hard for me. I was like, wow, we got Hal Bowers in the film, who works with Retro WDW, an incredible archivist and historian, and he's like giving these beautiful explanations of these attractions and things. But ultimately, it's like, yeah, we don't need that.
Okay. Was so is there anything, any specific moment that's on the cutting room floor that you and your theme park nerd heart of hearts is like, ah, why can't we put this in there?
Yes, yeah, the Horizon section in general.
Okay.
Leading into Hoot and Chief. I mean, there's things for like legal reasons we couldn't keep in there because we had done a like a in our fine cut we had just had temp music before we got our score, and we did like a Horizons needle drop, and it was awesome. It was that if you can dream it, you can do it.
Yep.
Horizons, like just full blown montage into a beautiful explanation of the attraction, and yeah, that was a bummer. That was one of those I was just talking about where it's like, we don't need this long of an explanation. It just needs to be really tight, give people a general overview. And if they want to dig deeper, yeah, go watch I think it's probably an hour long Martin's vids
Hmm.
of the full Horizons history and, learn more about it. But
Got it. Okay. And with these film festivals, I know you've got some more screenings, not showings, screenings. You've got some more screenings coming up. Where can our audience find the upcoming screenings of The Stolen Kingdom?
the biggest one is Florida Film Festival, which is April 11th. There's 3 screenings that night. The second one at 7 is sold out. There's one at 7:30, and then there's one at the Enzian at 6. That's our biggest one. The next day on April 12th, we're having a Stolen Kingdom art show. I asked a bunch of artists to do a piece inspired by the film. So lots of Horizons, River Country, Discovery Island, etc. art, and then we'll have artifacts from the film. We'll have some real Horizons props, some stuff that Hoot and Chief used, some stolen items, previously stolen items that I think have been maybe signed off as not a big deal anymore.
And
Um,
that's got to be an interesting process. It's like, do we care about this? What do we actually care about at this point? That's
There you'll I was very surprised that there was some stuff after we shot the film. Yeah, I was like, wow, okay, I guess they just really don't care. Maybe if they have like a copy of it and there's like 50 other of that same item, they just don't care about all of them. But yeah, we'll
got
have some animatronics and stuff. That's April 12th. I'm really excited for that. We'll have cast and crew at that. Patrick Spikes will be there. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Really excited.
I love it. What else can our the viewers expect? I mean, this is what's the I'm not familiar with the process of documentary filmmaking and shopping it to streaming services or anything like that. But is there a hopeful timeline for those who may not be in the Florida area? I mean, I'm up in North Carolina. A trip to Florida in 2 weeks is not the most ideal travel schedule for me. But is there a more of a general wide release plan in your mind?
Yeah, this is my first time doing this, so I'm learning as I go along. It's my first film, the first time I've made anything really. So I'm learning a lot. This is my film school because I dropped out. So it seems like films kind of run this festival circuit for about a year. They'll start with some kind of big festival early on. We started with Big Sky in February, and sometimes they'll wrap all the way around to the beginning of the following year. So we might go all the way until early 2026 with festivals. Hopefully, somewhere in there, we'll start negotiations for sale, which we're already kind of shopping it around. Um, so I would say definitely not this year for a wider release, whether it's theatrical or streaming. Definitely 2026. We might
Okay,
do a small theatrical run if we're lucky,
okay,
which I think be a lot of fun. And then we'll definitely, yeah, we'll land on a streaming service next year.
I love it. Well, then maybe you send one to Coaster101 so I can watch it in 2025 or something. I'm kidding,
Hey,
100%.
I can send you a screener link. So
If we will talk offline, I love this. Awesome. Well, Joshua, where can people learn a little bit more about the Stolen Kingdom and White Lake Films or White Lake Productions rather? Where can they learn these things?
I think the best place for us right now is Instagram. We've got a White Lake Productions Instagram account, Stolen Kingdom. It's at Stolen Kingdom Film. That's where like the minute to minute updates will be. We also have a website, stolenkingdomfilm.com. We'll keep the list of screenings updated there. There's a bunch of festival submissions out, so if anyone is itching to see it this year, stay tuned. But if you want to know like immediately when we get those announcements, definitely follow us on Instagram.
I love it. Awesome. Well, I'm very excited to see this when I can officially see it or talk about it. I'm, like I said, I love this nerdy type stuff, and this has been fantastic. So appreciate you taking the time. After you follow White Lake Productions and Stolen Kingdom Film on Instagram, make sure you follow Coaster101. We also have a website, coaster101.com. We're on all the social medias. We've got a new merch store, coaster101.com/merch. Very easy to go find it. And if you're listening, make sure you're liking, rating, reviewing, and subscribing, because the more people who listen to this show, the more great guests like Joshua we can bring on. So really appreciate everybody tuning in. Joshua, again, thank you so much. Can't wait to see Stolen Kingdom, and we'll talk to y'all again soon. See ya.